Hey, everybody, welcome to the very first ever Drawn to Lead book study. I'm super excited to have a conversation today with two of my good friends, and I'm going to introduce them or let them introduce themselves in a few minutes. But one of the reasons I'm so excited to have a book study is because as I've looked back over my leadership journey, one thing that I realized that the things that had the biggest impact were often books, but not just reading books, sitting with them, discussing them, and really figuring out how to put them into action. And the reason I love discussing them is because there's things that I may have got from the book that is different from somebody else. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring a couple other leaders together to talk about this book that I really care a lot about and has really shaped me in a lot of ways, to kind of hear their perspectives. But before we get to that, I want to first say the book that we're going to be talking about today is Simon Sinek's Start with Why. So I encountered this book many, many years ago. And it's one of these that books hit you differently in different seasons. So when I first read it, I saw it more, honestly, less as a leadership book and more as a book for how organizations should operate. But as I went back and started looking at it deeper, I realized that the way it talks about the heart of it, so the principle of it, which is what I'm going to simplify this down to, is something that should be the beginning of all leadership, right? And so we'll get to that in a second. I'm really, really excited to unpack that with y'all. And so what I want you guys to do is introduce yourself, talk a little bit about how long you've been a leader, and then share about the first time you became a leader.
Yeah, so my name is Justin Meeker. I am the Chief Technology Officer at a national aesthetics, wellness, and skincare company. Never saw myself go in that direction. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I have been in leadership for, I think I was thrown into my first leadership role. It was back in 2010. So before that, had a few different type of manager roles, but really thrust into it back in 2010 for the first time.
Awesome. So I'm Alicia Housen. Most recently have been the COO of exercise.com, which is a software company. We were recently acquired, so some shifts have gone on since then. I think my first leadership role was probably in business world, was back in 2018, actually. It was like, here you go, you lead people now. And so when you said you were thrown into leadership, I was like, yep, been there. So that's how long I've been on this ride officially.
Well, I'm in the same boat as both of you. I never received a bunch of training that prepared me for my first leadership role. I remember I had gotten a new job. Obviously, I'm trying to grow in my career. And one of the things that they said was going to be part of the job was growing a team. And I was excited to do that and had absolutely no idea how to do that. And so it was, I'm just going to hire someone. And so I hired someone. And then I hired somebody else and then one other person. And all of a sudden I was leading 3 people and I literally had no idea what I was doing. Try to emulate the good leaders that I had had in the past, the things that they would do, right? The outside actions that they would do, and then try to avoid the bad leaders, what they did. And that's kind of how I did it, which kind of brings me to what we're going to be talking about today with Start with Why. And so one thing that I'm doing with all of the books on Drawn to Lead is I'm trying to distill them down into one single principle. And the reason I'm trying to do that is when you read these books are just filled with so many good things, so many good stories and points and different ways of thinking. But the problem is I would often get to the end of these books and then have so many different things and thoughts in my head that I was like, how do I do any of that? And so what would happen is I would then close the book I would put it on my shelf, and then I would feel very, very good. Like, look at all these books that I read. And so my goal is to really simplify these down to one principle and try to make it as actionable as possible. So in Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, he talks about something called the golden circle. And the principle, he calls it why, I call it purpose. The golden circle is something that should really be one of the first things that you think through when you take over leadership. In the center is why, your purpose. And then around that, the next is how. It's how you're going to approach it. And then the what is the actions. And what I did is I would often approach the outside ring first. What am I doing? Am I doing the right things as a leader? But I was not examining why I was doing those things. And so I realized very, very quickly, I started making decisions that were not really good for the team I was leading, but they were good for me. And once I got back and started examining my why, I realized that my why was not in a good place. My why was focused on me. But Justin, Alicia, I'd love to hear. So when you guys kind of fell into leadership, like, did you guys naturally fall into this? Like, did you have this sense of purpose of why you are going to be a leader? How did that show up for you?
Justin,
Yeah, I
you
can
go
jump
first.
in on that one. Sorry. Sorry,
Yeah,
Alicia.
no, I'm saying you go first.
No, I can jump in, Kacy, because it really was a situation where, just like I said, I kind of fell into it, right? And I had some small, I would say, kind of pseudo leadership types of roles before that. But when I really got into it, it was self-centered. It was all about like, oh my gosh, I have to do these things because now I have this title and now I have to do this. And now I have people that are expecting things from me and my team. And a lot of it really was about, are we able to do these things? Are we able to be successful as a team? And for me, when I look back on that, a lot of it was self-centered. It really was looking at, this is a reflection of me. The team's success is a reflection of my success. And that's how I carried things. And so when it came to the work, when it came to the ways that we did things, I really didn't focus much, not even on my own why or the team's why. It was really just, hey, we have all this stuff we have to do. Let's go get this stuff done. Now, I knew what the why was within the organization I was at because they were actually really good. The organization I was at was great at understanding the why. It was actually one of the first places I saw Simon Sinek's book, but I wasn't great at it yet. And so for those first few years, I hate looking back at it sometimes because it was kind of a train wreck, right? It was probably the very first time where I was hit with really, really hard pieces, probably about 2 years into that role, where I got feedback, where I had about 3 team members quit. And a lot of it came back into the fact that how I was leading or wasn't leading, and the fact that I really wasn't focused on the team's purpose and the why. It was very executional. It came off micromanagement. It came off, you're just telling us to do things, but you're not actually focused on us. You're not actually focused on helping lead us how to achieve these things. And so for me, it was a hard few years, and it was kind of a wake-up call to realize, oh, I can be really good at doing things. And people can see that and say, hey, you're really good at this stuff. Help these other people and the rest of this team do it. But because I didn't have a good central point on my own why, on the purpose, what I was supposed to do as a leader, which newsflash, I've since learned about what it means to actually lead a team and help grow a team. But because that wasn't really a part of it, I completely derailed. And it took that hard wake up call for me, Kacy, to actually come back to a point and go, oh my gosh, how do I grow here? How do I actually come back to the foundational point of being a leader and relearn, so to speak, what that needs to be?
Yeah, I think I had a little bit of a different experience, but I think we both got thrown into leadership probably for the same reason, which is that we were really good at the what. And we understood the how and we were good at the what. So the assumption is then just go like replicate yourself, like be in charge of other people, teach them the what, make them understand the how. You know, I think that's how a lot of leadership starts initially, is just really good doers, really good executors. And so I think for me, I would say I stumbled into it because I was really good at the how and the what. I think what I, at the time, I think I was able to get, I would say respect probably from my team, because they didn't know the how or the what. It was at a startup. So it was a little bit of a different experience where we're all figuring out everything together, right? So I got a lot of respect as a leader because I knew the how and the what, and they didn't. So they needed me to be good at their job, right? And so that's a little bit of a different experience versus later in my career when I've inherited teams. That's a whole other set of challenges, as opposed to building a team from scratch. But I think it was more so I had to evolve into the why mattering. I don't even know if that's a word. It's going to be a word today. Because once we got the how down and once we got the what down, at some point, the gas tank is empty. And so I had to evolve into like, even though they were happy in their jobs, the teams I was leading, at some point it was like, but why are we doing this? Why does it matter? Even though we're crushing KPIs, right? Or even though we're doing really well and I like the people I work with, like even when things are going well, at some point, I think we all kind of wake up with that existential question of like, but why are we doing it? And so I had to evolve in that. Even though I would say things were going really well, I still think that at some point, if you haven't figured out the middle of that circle, it's going to come to roost, right? You're going to have to do that hard work within yourself and with your team in order for you to reach another level of success.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, I was just going to say, what I love, Alicia, is that, again, you and I were on different trajectories with that, right? Like yours was going really well. Mine was falling apart at the seams and I didn't even know it at the time. But I think in both those scenarios, I think what it makes me realize, Kacy, is, for me, I was focused on the title. I was leaning in there, right? And it was really interesting because I, like you, Alicia, I didn't focus on the why, that center point, but I was high energy as a leader. And so I had this ability to draw people around, and people were like, oh, I want to go work with Justin. I want to go be around Justin. But it was high energy and a title without the why. And so I think it's interesting when I look back at my own scenario, I go, oh, I assume that's why everything went this way. But to hear from you and go, hey, my team was actually doing really well, but we couldn't even move up a layer. I think it's just a reminder that that center point of why it really does become a limiter in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you said a couple things specifically, Alicia, about getting into leadership because you were really good at the what. I think that's typically how you move up in an organization, right? You come in, you're hired for a specific job, you do that job. If you do it well, you earn trust. You get to a point where you've done so well that the company has grown or the area has grown and you need to expand. You can only do so much, right? So you need more people. So then they said, okay, well, continue to do what you're doing. And then now also add this leadership. So when that happened to me, it became another box to check, right? Another goal to do. Okay, well, now I'm a leader. Now I feel important. I've gone up to this next level. And as Sinek calls it, are you having people follow you because you're inspiring them, or are you doing it through manipulation? And what he means by that manipulation is around like, what are the motivators that people have to follow you? So as I'm sitting here going through this book, and I always ask myself this when I'm reading any sort of like leadership book: is this idealistic or is this realistic? Because it's really easy to write a book and say, this is the way it should be. And it's another thing for it to actually be a reality as a leader. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Like, is this just a nice to have? Is this just something that it'd be like, oh yeah, it's cool. Yeah. But if you don't have it, it's not a big deal. And I would say for me, and I want to hear you both answer that question. Part of it comes back to what you were just talking about, Alicia, of the hollowness of the normal motivators in our job, right? How you are moving through an organization, you hit goals. You know what? You get to that goal. Let's say you crush it. There's this excitement that you crushed it. And then guess what? Surprise, you get another goal. If the only motivator is goal or fear, if they get the goal, then it's a new goal. And if it's fear, that's just going to create anxiety and they're going to leave. So having people understand a purpose and what they're working towards beyond just some of these commonplace indicators is something that to me makes finding your purpose, finding your team's purpose super important. But have you guys seen that in your jobs, or is this just another one of those idealistic books?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say to that where I think you made an important distinction at the very beginning, which is like when you read this book at first, you think about it from an organizational perspective, right? And so like that's where my brain is going initially, like what's the organization's why? But I think that's what's so interesting about the concept is as a leader, you're balancing your own why of figuring out what that is. You're balancing what is the organization's why and should I care about, should my team care about that? But then the third layer is even if you have those first two nailed, what's your individual team members' whys, right? And so I could have the best why in the world, and the organization could have the best why in the world, but my why might not mean a rip to my team, right? And so it's understanding what is their why, and so that's where the idealistic, I think, kind of comes into play, where you think I can just nail this once and then like I've checked the why box. Now we're good. Now we're all in the same boat, rowing in the same direction. I think that's the idealistic version. I think the realistic version is you need the whys of everybody involved. And right. And you have to figure out how to lead those people individually. Some of them are motivated by money. Great. Some of them are motivated by flexibility. Great. Some of them praise. Some of them, whatever those things are, they're all wonderful things, but you have to figure out what their why is. And that's where it's like the real nitty gritty. The start with why of the ideal is thinking you can just nail it once. I think the realistic is what's yours, what's your team's, and are you paying attention to when those whys change? Because humans evolve over time. So if you lead them over seasons of life, it could be different. So it's like keeping up with that, I think, is the real around this concept at an individual level. That's just my experience.
Yeah, and I think mine's really similar too. Like when I look back at that first experience, kind of when everything hit the fan, so to speak, I remember sitting down with a much more experienced leader, and basically they walked through and said, Justin, we're going to go through and we're going to take this thing called an EQ assessment. We're going to have it proctored by somebody, an actual formal assessment. We're going to walk through the results. Everything comes back. They're like, hey, you're great at all these things, but where you suck is empathy. And it was really interesting as we started unpacking that. It's exactly what you were saying, Alicia, was that's great that you understand the organization's why, Justin. That's great that you maybe even have your own purpose. You're really good at the what or the how. They're like, but have you actually stopped to understand what makes your team tick on an individual level? Do you know why they are doing this job? Do you know what gets them excited in the morning? What are they passionate about? Is it just that they're coin operating and they just want more money? Or is there something deeper with them? And it was really interesting where I was able to start making some of those turns as a leader is exactly what you were talking about, Alicia. It was actually starting to understand a deeper layer of what does my team care about? Individually, what are their whys? Why are they here? And when I started realizing the importance of that, it allowed me to start coaching them into different places. I had team members after that at that organization and at other organizations where we would start talking about their why and go, hey, actually, you might be a better fit over here now. Why don't we talk about that? But I think it was the same thing, was me understanding my own why. That's great. But I really don't think it's necessarily idealistic. I really think it's necessary. And I think the best leaders that I've had, at least in my experience, are the ones that did take the time to go, hey, here's all the layers of these. Here's why we do this at the organization, what we're doing. Here's why I'm here. Justin, let's talk about what your why is. Let's talk about what motivates you. And let's make sure that we're working in a way that you do feel that you do feel like you're chasing after your own personal why with things.
Yeah, so I would offer that I don't think that there's just one why for yourself, right? I have multiple whys, and I feel like you guys said I want to kind of dig in on some of the stuff that you guys were talking about, because I think it's really important. The why of an individual contributor can be not okay if that is the only why when they become a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, so when I was an individual contributor, one of my whys was, man, I wanted to become more successful, not just for myself or my ego. I wanted to do that so I could give a better life for my family, right? That was my why for going into work, right? And I was excited about that. And so in my mind, I was approaching things like, how do I do my work better? How do I make sure I get invited to the right meetings? How do I show up so that I can get promoted so that I can do these other things? That's great. However, whenever I became a leader, that was still my core why. My core why was still to win, to grow for my family. That's not bad. It's not a bad why. However, my situation changed at work and I had people reporting to me. And what happened is those people became a means to make my why happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I've got a bunch of people and I'm going to set goals and they need to perform so that I hit my goals and I get promoted and I get raises and I get bonuses. And so they became these chess pieces in my game of moving all the way up. And it took me a while to realize that, okay, because I was like, no, I'm still doing this for my family. I still felt like I had my one why. Like I got my why. And I was working for an organization much like you that like, no, we have a corporate why. We're going to do this and we're going to help these people. So as long as we say, I'm going to get mine, right? And we're helping people when we do it, that's great. I'm doing it. But something changes when somebody is reporting to you, right? There is a shift in leadership. It is not another task that gets put on you. It is something that needs to change. And so I have multiple whys, and because of that, I have to do stuff personally to remind myself of what those whys are. Because if I don't do this, I will default to the why that is really best for me. So one of the whys I have, so this says my why is I want to help people grow, right? That is something that is really important to me. But if I don't put this in front of me, I have an achievement mindset that I get so focused on my goals. I get so focused on hitting revenue targets. That's what's in the conversations that I'm in most often. And if I don't keep that front and center in my mind, I will approach one-on-ones with my team differently. I forget that no. Them being the same person in 6 months is not a win for me. Like I am here to help them grow. And so when I see that note, when I see the different things that I have around, it reminds me I've got multiple whys that are going to need to show up in different ways. Do you guys have that? Do you guys have multiple whys that you kind of operate from?
Yeah, and I think there's different weights to them at different seasons as well, right? Like when you're talking about, I mean, what's the core reason we have jobs and we work? We want to be able to make money and provide for our families. And I think for me, years ago, I realized, oh, this actually isn't a bad thing. Making money is okay, but there's a layer to that. But it only takes you so far, and I see that with my team as well. And I have seasonalities with this, right? Where I realize as I work with up and coming leaders or new team members, yeah, making money is a good why. We want to support our own lives, but it only goes so far. It doesn't weather the storm, so to speak, right? When things start to get difficult, when there's new challenges, when you achieve these goals, like you said, and it's like, great, we did this, but what is keeping me moving forward within here? And so when I look at myself, I kind of think, I hate making a Shrek reference, but it's kind of like an onion, right? Like there are multiple layers within there that I realize, depending upon the season, I have to be able to fluidly understand within myself, great, what is my motivator? Why am I doing this, or why am I making this specific decision? I think as a leader too, when I look at the people aspect, right? Like there's a lot of days, and I know you guys are probably like this, where when things are really hard in leadership, it's really easy to look and go, man, I wonder what it'd be like to go back to just a really great individual contributor.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I don't do that is not necessarily because of money, because you can make a lot of money being a great individual contributor at companies. but it's the people aspect. It's being able to work, being able to grow people, being able to lead people, help them achieve their goals. That's another layer of that. And so I agree with you, Kacy. I do think there may not be just one central. I think for companies, a lot of times it's easier to have like, hey, here's our big number one, our big central why. But as an individual, at least my experience, everybody has different ones, and those flux depending upon the season.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think, Kacy, to your point of like you have a why for your family, right? And then you have a why for your career. Justin, similarly, of wanting to provide. I have, which you can't see, but right over the top of my laptop, which is on the other side of the camera, is a sign that says, the most important work you will ever do is within the walls of your home. And I have it positioned right there for a reason. And for me, it's a reminder to shut the dadgum laptop at the end of the day because your family matters, and I had to hang that there from a season of doing that not very well. Right? Most of these things, do you ever see those rules when you like walk into like a building, you see rules on the wall and it's some sort like a ridiculous rule and you're like, what happened here that has made it to be a rule on the wall? Right? Something crazy. So it's like a rule on the wall, but it came as a result of sacrifices I wish I hadn't made. Right? And that was because I was disconnected at that time from that why, because I was so connected to the why at work. So that's the other thing of like understanding how they connect to each other, how they maybe contradict each other. Sometimes your whys could, or how they're on the good side. Hopefully they're in support of each other. Hopefully they're sequential and maybe even linear, and one begets the other. But sometimes there's friction, right? Because your company wants everything from you, not necessarily a bad way. That's why they pay you, but your family also wants everything from you. So sometimes those whys, you want to show up as 100%. For me, I want to show up 100%, in both. And sometimes that's easy and sometimes it's not. So well, yes, I think there's definitely multiple whys at play.
What I love about what you just said, actually you too, Kacy, is I think there's something that's a helpful reminder to me as well, is that why it's easy to forget sometimes. Like we have to remind ourselves over and over. I was laughing, Alicia, when you were talking about what's over top of you. Mm-hmm. I have this right in front of my computer, and it's just a black and white 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that I've had on my desk for the last year. Because I had to be reminded, like, this is what I'm doing this for. This is why I need to shut down my laptop and go interact with the family. Like, it's okay to shut down my why at work and make sure I can focus over here. But what I love is that both of you all showed that Post-it note as well. It made me feel a little bit better going, oh, I have to be reminded of that as well.
Well, and I think that's what's interesting about leaders, right? As we talked about, we become leaders because usually it's because we're really good at the what and the how, which probably means we're high performing people. Not to sound self-aggrandizing. I'm just like, typically most leaders get there because they were some sort of high performing IC, right? So it makes sense that as we evolve in our own leadership, we have to be paying attention to those signals of, are we, Kacy, to your point, are we in alignment with our why now, or are we still in alignment with an old why, but now I'm in a new role? And how does my why need to evolve here? Or how does my behavior need to evolve with a new why in a new role? And those are hard switches to make, especially to your point about you're living systems either by design or default. I think we end up in leadership positions with systems, old systems, on purpose or not. And so are we paying attention to know we need to upgrade those systems? And painfully so, I was not aware of that early on.
Well, I mean, I will say I try to communicate drawn to lead of like, man, I'm out here to help all of these new leaders. And yes, 1,000% that I really hope that this conversation, the sketches, the stuff that I put out really help people. But if I'm being completely honest, it's because I need to be reminded of this stuff over and over and over again. Because a lot of the stuff that I talk about on here, like I almost, there's been numerous times where I've wanted to shut Drawn to Lead or any sort of leadership content that I would put out. because I honestly, like when I look at myself through the lens of these books, all I see is failure, right? All I see is the stuff that I'm not living up to. And what happened is I left a company where there was a huge focus on leadership. I was getting together, doing book studies. We were just talking about it all the time, right? I left that and I joined another company where we never really talked about it at all. And I saw that after about 6 months, I started falling back into my old patterns of how I just naturally operated, right? It's exactly what you're saying. Like my systems that I had in place, I had scaffolded new systems around those, but I wasn't keeping them up, right? I wasn't making sure to be intentional about that. And so what happens is, I mean, if you read Atomic Habits, like that's what happens. You just fall back in. Even if you replace, you can fall back into those same triggers. And so talking about these things, reading books, having book studies, having these conversations, you never arrive at leadership. Like you don't get to the place where you're like, I've got it, because something is going to change. You're going to get new people on your team. You're going to be in a new organization. You're going to get a new goal. You're going to get new, everything is going to change. Like that's the only constant, is that it's always going to change. And if you approach everything with the exact same systems, it's going to break down, right? And you're just going to go back to doing what comes naturally to me. And most of us are not born just intrinsically amazing leaders, right? Nobody comes out of the womb and they're just like, well, I'm the best leader. People come out charismatic, which I think we can, you said that earlier, Justin, like you just have an infectious personality, which is one of the reasons I just loved working with you when we started working together, because you always came with a smile. You always had a ton of energy and it was super fun. And Alicia, if I'm being honest, that's the same thing about you too. Like when we started hanging out with the LinkedIn group, you just had a super infectious personality as well. Positive, excited, ready to take things on. Alicia, what is your Enneagram? Because I know, Justin, you're a 7.
I'm an 8, wing 7.
You're wing 7.
You're an 8, wing 7. Okay. I do see that. The 7 comes out, but yeah, when you're ready to make a decision, you're ready. Yeah, you're ready.
I'm going to make it, and then we're going to party.
We're going to have fun with it.
That's what we're doing.
But I'm going to tell you the decision first, and I'm going to tell you why it's the right one, and you don't get to disagree. No, sorry.
I mean, you can. Then we'll go party together. That's fine. It's not personal.
Love it.
You know?
And I think, Kacy, it's really interesting because the energy, like you said, people come out with charisma. People don't come out being a leader. And I think even what I had to learn along the way is the idea of energy, or if you want to call it charisma or whatever, it really does only take you so far. And eventually the cracks start to show, right? It doesn't weather the storms. It doesn't get you through difficult conversations with team members. It doesn't get you through difficult situations in a company either, right? And I think that was the hardest thing for me to realize, like you said, is, oh my gosh, I have to be the one to double down on here. And if I don't keep reminding myself and trying to grow and looking for places, that charisma, that high energy as an Enneagram 7 is only going to go so far. And then it's going to all crash down.
Yeah, you're already unpacking the next book.
Sorry.
So I'm going to put a pin in that because everything that you said is 100% right. So on page 94, this is one of my favorite sections of the book. And the section is called "Give 'em a Cathedral." So I want to read this, and then I want your reactions on how you've seen this play out. Have you seen this play out? And again, is it idealistic? Is it realistic? So consider the story of 2 stonemasons. You walk up to the first stonemason and ask, "Do you like your job?" He looks up at you and replies, "I've been building this wall for as long as I can remember. The work is monotonous. I work in the scorching hot sun all day. The stones are heavy, and lifting them day after day can be backbreaking. I'm not even sure if this project will be completed in my lifetime. But it's a job, it pays the bills." You thank him for his time and you walk on. About 30 feet away, you walk up to a second stonemason. You ask him the same question, "Do you like your job?" He looks up and replies, "I love my job. I'm building a cathedral." Sure, I've been working on this wall for as long as I can remember, and yes, the work is sometimes monotonous. I work in the scorching hot sun all day. The stones are heavy, and lifting them day after day can be backbreaking. I'm not even sure if this project will be completed in my lifetime, but I'm building a cathedral. I love that. I love that story. I love that idea of if somebody knows what is the bigger purpose, it can make the hard parts of your job better. And so I thought, like, it's a great story. It's a great visual, but have you seen this play out in your journey?
Okay. I would say yes. And I think a few different things. I worked for a CEO one time who was like full on Enneagram 7, just for the record, full bore, and a self-admitted terrible people leader in terms of I take that back. Terrible people manager. It's different. And so I say all that to say sometimes he would jump on Slack and he would say, everybody, like, take a screenshot of what you're working on right now. Like, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But he was just like, what he wanted everybody to see how what everyone was doing was contributing to what we were doing. For so like an engineer would post their code screen, right? Someone else is posting like customer support tickets, right? Someone else is posting like a sales pipeline dashboard in Salesforce, or whatever. So it was really cool for us to go, even in the whatever your kind of day to day is, it was a way of him trying to connect us to, we're all doing something in our lane to help the greater purpose of that company. And so I think it was, as an example, I think there were people even at that company that were like, all I do is send emails all day. Right. And then there were other people at the company that were like, I'm getting to help small businesses. Right. And so I think not only have I seen it play out, I think the hardest part for me around that as a leader is you can't make people care about something that they don't care about. And so you're more than likely going to have both types of people that work at your org or on your team. And so for me, it's like, maybe you don't care about building a cathedral. And I need to be okay with that. That was where, like, that was something I had to shift in me of like, you don't have to care about what I care about. But my job then is to figure out, well, then what do you care about? Right. And so maybe for that first person in the example where he's not connecting it to the vision of building a cathedral, but it would be like, what does your paycheck mean for your family? Right. Or what example are you setting around work ethic for your children? Right. So you have to figure that out. So not only have I seen it play out in terms of you can have two people in the same role who view it very differently, just like the cathedral example. But I think for me as a leader, it was realizing just because they don't have the same vision as you doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong person, wrong seat. Sometimes it does, but that's where you have to figure that stuff out as a leader to go, did I put them in the wrong seat? Or am I missing the boat on their why? And I assume it's mine, or I assume it's the org's why. And I now have to do the work, like we were talking earlier, figuring out what is it for them. So that's just a little bit of how I've seen it.
I thought you were when you said he said to send a screenshot, I was like, is this like a micromanager way to check in and say, right now, don't change? So he's going to get like pictures of people watching cat videos and he's checking
Oh,
in on like, what are
yeah.
you doing? Versus like, hey, I want to see how like that one's better. And again, see where my head goes
Mm-hmm.
immediately in my default brain is like, check in
And
on him. Oh, that's
And one time when he did that, I took a selfie shot. I took 30 minutes every week to go lead a high school softball team as their FCA character coach. And when he posted that, that's where I was. I wasn't even at work. Right. So I took a selfie of like me and the team of the girls. I was like, this is what I'm doing at 12:30 every Thursday. I do this from 12:30 to 1. And that was actually a very safe place to be able to say that, working there. But I think, again, that probably helped them understand my why, right? Of what do I like? That's why remote mattered to me, is because I could still invest in my community, right? But to your point, yes, it was not micromanaging, but it was a really cool way to connect everybody's individual work to the greater vision, even though what you're working on is very different.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Casey, when we walk through that. I just had a recent scenario with this. And I mean, I've had multiple throughout my whole career, right? Like I can think back to places where I turned down jobs, where I left jobs because of that why, where I did have to have conversations and either move people on from an organization or move
Hmm.
them to different seats. But it was really interesting. I had a scenario here just recently with my current company, my current role that stands out to me where I love solving problems. That's my foundational thing, and it's taken me a lot of years to realize, oh, that's kind of my core driver. I love solving problems for people. I love being able to do things that make life easier, whatever it is. And so I've had a team that I've built up, and we have been working tirelessly for the last year to build some things with our organization that we truly look at, and I go, oh my gosh, I can see the vision of if we can consolidate this, and this, it's going to make life easier over here for our providers. It's going to make life easier for their patients. It's going to help us grow revenue in these ways. Like I can see it, right? It's the Enneagram 7 thing. I can see out in the horizon what this looks like. And it's been a lot of work with a small team. And we had a conversation recently where we looked at this with the group and said, hey, do we need to keep going down this path, or should we take kind of this other road, what might be easier to say, hey, let's just keep the status quo of where we've been. We know we've done a lot of work here, but maybe we just go ahead and cut our losses and take the path where we can do this, and this. And I had to wrestle with that a long time. And it's really interesting because when we came back around to it, I was looking at that going, hey, actually, that's pretty enticing. Do we just stop the really, really hard work and just focus on maybe doing some other things that might be a little easier to solve problem wise, and it's going to be okay, but it's not going to get us to where that vision is. And I think that was a scenario after working through with the team going, hey, I truly believe that this problem we're trying to solve really is the thing worth chasing down. And I know it's hard, and I'm going to invest more time. And here's why it matters. And here's what the other side looks like. But I think if we keep this trajectory, here's what we're going to see pay off in the next 3 to 4 months. And it was an interesting scenario where I look back now in this question, Kacy, and I go, oh, it really was for me, my underlying why that drove me that direction. Because again, I'm looking at this saying, no, my purpose here at this company for this period of time is for this reason. And we know there's different whys and different seasons, but I knew I was looking at that going, this is a harder choice. It's going to be a lot harder work over here for me and the team, but I know the outcome is going to be wildly different. And I know that the reason that I am at this company for this period of time is to solve these problems this way, is to take us beyond just the status quo and go to a potential solution that solves problems in a different way. And so it was an interesting one where I would say it's an exhausting decision, but it was 100% driven by that underlying purpose for me for this season, knowing, hey, I have my purpose as an individual, but again, I also know what my purpose is at this company over the next year, over the next 2 years.
When I think of those two stonemasons, and I think back of the teams that I've led, I would say pretty consistently I have a mix of both on any given team that I have. And I think that's normal, and I think that's okay. One of the reasons that I still think that you should try and push to get as many of those stonemasons on your team that are building a cathedral is because the way that they end up approaching their work is completely different. A
Yeah.
lot of times, I think of if you don't understand what you're trying to do, right? These stonemasons understood they're building a cathedral, right? You have a set of tasks that are leveling up to something bigger,
Mhm.
right? They may not be placing every stone, but they are placing stones that then allow the mortar and then allow the next, X, Y, and Z. But if they only know their piece, you move a stone from here to here, you move it here to here, and they don't understand, oh, wait, these stones that I'm moving are the base foundation. And if they don't line up properly, it does not create a solid foundation for all of these other things, and the cathedral is going to fall down. But the people that understand, no, I'm not just placing a stone, I'm building the foundation for this cathedral. It changes the way that they approach putting those stones where they need to go. So some of the things that I've seen of how this play out, like Sinek talks a lot about that people just in general are drawn to leaders that are really good at communicating what they believe, communicating their why. And the reason is because it gives them more clarity and certainty on the things that they're doing so that they know how to do it right. But for me personally, that is why it's so important to communicate why, because I want to create people that want to follow this and are going to push me and say, hey, I thought we were doing this, but you just said to do this. Those things don't sync up, right? Like that's not what we're trying to do here. And I need people to do that to hold me accountable. So I would love to hear if you have it, a time where you kind of failed, right? Where you didn't lead with your purpose. You didn't lead with your why. How did that show up and what was the result of that for you?
I feel like I've had multiple times where that's happened to me over the years. I've actually, even in the scenario I was just talking about, Kacy, one of the key things that I had to come back to reality on was just like the cathedral example, both those workers, they knew what they were building at the beginning, right? But they forgot over time. And I've had multiple scenarios in my career, and it's a lesson I have to keep learning over and over again. But most recently, part of the reason we had to come back to that conversation about like, hey, do we need to stay this course? What are we really doing? What are we going toward? What is this bigger vision? Is because in my personality type, it's really easy to set that vision, to see what that is, to go after it, to say, this is the cathedral we're building, everybody. Let's get excited. Everybody's rallied around it. But then in the day to day, it's so easy for me to focus on, for myself, looking at going toward that cathedral, but forgetting to make sure I'm pointing other people to it over and over and over and over and over. And so I think where I have learned this for myself, and again, it creeps up from time to time, but even in the last year, is realizing, oh my gosh, I can say this, I can communicate the why, I can talk about it a couple times, a month, every now and again in team meetings. But I think the hard lesson that I've had to learn is that vision, that why, leaks so quickly for everybody. And I have a couple people on my team that they operate how I do, right? They can see far down the road and they're like, no, this is what we're going to in the next year. But for most people, I always forget that the majority of people don't see that way, that they don't latch on to what the cathedral is supposed to look like down the road. And so for me, I think the biggest lesson I've had to learn is this is a week by week thing. I have to point them to the cathedral that we're building every stinking week. And if I'm not doing that, and here's the deal, it's not just about the team I'm leading. Where I tend to fail at that is going, my peers, my other fellow leaders on other teams, my leaders within the executive team, right? Going, oh, it's not just about telling my team about the cathedral we're building. It's about making sure that everybody on this bus, everybody at this company understands what this is. And again, I always take for granted that I know what that is and I've communicated it a couple times. But if we're not doing that day in and day out, week after week after week after week, people forget the why. People forget what the cathedral's supposed to look at. And I think for me, that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I've had to learn probably over the last year is, the repetition. The repetition is necessary to make sure that the guy that's just building the wall day in and day out, if I don't want him to just get stuck in a mindset of building the wall, it's on me to keep pointing over to show up with the blueprints all the time and go, hey, here's what it is. Here's where your wall fits into the bigger picture.
Yeah. Do they say on average a person has to hear something like 7 times before they actually hear it or something like that?
I feel like now it's probably like 15 or 20 times with all the distractions.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I think what was coming into mind for me around failure around this is I would say, and again, I think this is just the Achilles heel of being moved into leadership from being being good at the how and the what, is that sometimes I would forget, how would I say that? I would focus on telling the team how and what to do what I need them to do. And then if they didn't do it right, but that's because I actually didn't give them the outcome. I didn't give them the why I'm asking for this, right? And so what happens is, oh, I hate learning this lesson over and over, but I have, which is I don't always understand the nuance. So in my brain, I'm like, hey, can you go pull this report to do this, and this is the information I need. Whereas if I had given them the why, like what am I actually trying to find out, they would pull an entirely different report with entirely different data that would actually tell me what I want. But in my mind, I think it's this way. I think the how and the what is this. So I give them the how and the what, and then I get, back what I don't want. But that's my fault, right? And so that has been my learning over and over of, it's the evolution of leadership where they come and they ask you a question and you give them the answer. Then they come and ask you a question and you ask them a question back, right? And then they come and you tell them, what you need from them. And I think the evolution of like, what is done? Paint, I think it's a Brene Brown phrase, which is like, paint done for me. And so I learned that early as an IC. I reported to a co-founder at the time, and she would say what she wanted. And I would go, paint done for me, because it was a startup. It was messy. So what she was telling me, I was like, it's really hard to get handlebars over the words that you're saying, right? When I'm trying to think about how to do this. So I would say paint done for me. I think it was Dare to Lead. I think it came from that book early on. And so then she would tell me what done looks like. And I'm like, got it. I don't need anything else. I don't need you to tell me how. I don't need you to tell me what. I needed to understand where we were going, and I'm happy to figure out how to get there. At some point, as I became a leader, I forgot to do that well, right? Because I was so good at the how and the what. So I would instruct, if you will, through the how and the what, instead of starting with the why and letting them figure out the how and the what, because they actually know their jobs way better than I do. And so more often than not, more often than I would like, I have had to learn this lesson of like, give them the why. And if you've hired the right people, the chances are they know the how and the what way better than you do, miss. Even though you think you do, but you're not as connected to that work anymore in your seat. Things have changed since you were there. And so that's been the learning for me and my failure of just shortcutting, right? Shortcutting to like, here's the how and the what, because I think that'll get us to our outcome faster, because I have basically taken all the thinking out of it for them. When in reality, their thinking is what I actually needed, not mine. And that has been a tough pill to swallow.
And I love the example you gave of the reports. Like if I started with what the outcome, what done actually looks like, they're going to take a wildly different approach. I was just talking this with my principal engineer recently, where we were talking about the idea that for a software developer, it's really easy to grab a card on a board, say, cool, this is what I need to execute. Let me go execute it. But what we were watching was this interesting pattern where people were executing on things, but going, whoa, 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 you're not putting the pieces together. Like you don't understand what the cathedral looks like. And because you don't understand what it looks like, you're really not building this in the way that fits into it. And so I think like, I wish I had a great solution for that, but I feel like for me, it's every day I'm having to remind myself of that. Like, oh my gosh, I can't just step in and tell them how to do it. And I'm curious, Alicia, if you struggle with that as well, still like, okay, every week I have to remind myself, tell them the why. Don't tell them how to do it. Tell them the why.
Oh yeah. I think for me, it is, I have had to eat the humble pie. Like the reason why I have to keep learning it is because I keep being reminded when I'm wrong. Right. Yeah. And so that's why I have to keep relearning it, because I'm apparently a slow learner. And so like my team keeps serving me humble pie. And I'm like, again, if I had just given you the why, it would have saved us both time. So yes, I'm still learning it. And I think that the only way for me that helps me do it less and less over time is I, at this point, am leading leaders. And so that has been what has helped me go, I'm not leading ICs anymore. And that's not a bad thing or a good thing. I'm ascribing no meaning to that. I'm just paying attention to the evolution of leadership, which is if I want to, like, I need to replicate leadership, not just replicate results. So in order to do that, I have to lead better so that they learn how to lead better and not just be better doers. Because if they're leaders, I need them to be better leaders, not better doers. And so that for me has been I have to keep reminding myself, like, you lead leaders now, not ICs. Again, not good or bad. It's just an evolution.
This conversation that we're having right now, both is amazing and also I'm like you, Alicia, where I'm like, I'm wanting to bang my head on the table because I do that all the time. And even talking about it right now, I'm putting pieces together of why I operate that way because I'm very much the same way. I often communicate the how. That's my first or not even like the how and the what. Like it's
Yeah.
like, hey, I want you to do this and here's how I want you to do it. Right? And I completely skip communicating the why. Like I told you the why a couple months ago or maybe when I hired you, but now I'm going to tell you the how and the what, right? And not only does that then put all the reliance on me, it just there's no context. And so we all are sitting in the C-suite in our company, right? And in those roles, a majority of our time and energy is in the strategy land, right? Like we are thinking strategically, where do we want to go? Where do we want to take the company, right? What are the things that we should be doing to succeed and grow in the market? How do we serve our customers better, et cetera, right? We live up in like crafting the why for our organization, where it's going. And the problem is like as we go down, then all of a sudden maybe we create rocks and maybe we create goals. And those rocks and goals are often the how and the what, right? And so then we go to our team and say, hey, this is our rock for this quarter. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. And they're like, and here are your goals to hit that rock. And it's like, cool, okay. And we say it in a way that it makes sense, at least to us, right? Because we're saying everything through our lens of our strategic vision, where we're trying to go and where we're trying to take it. But when we communicate it, they don't have any of that context. Our leaders they don't have the context because they're not sitting in the rooms that we're sitting in. We're not, right? They're not looking at things the way that we are. And if we're not bringing that back to our team whenever we're asking them to do a what and a how, they're not going to do it like we do it. And then they go do it and we're like, oh, I think I hired the wrong people again. How do I keep doing this? They don't even know what they're doing. Like they're just, I told them what to do and they're not doing a great job. And I keep going back to, man, the reason I don't do it is because I feel like I don't have time. Right? The amount of time sometimes it takes to get people to understand, like I am sitting in these meetings every week. I'm having multiple hours of conversation and thought around this strategy, and I take zero time to communicate that to my team. And so they just get a bunch of what and how thrown at them. And they're like, okay, well, let's go do it because they want to make me happy because that's how they're going to get raises and bonuses and all of that stuff. And so starting with the why are we doing this? I've got to remind myself, I can't just come and give people that what and how and expect them to do it at the level. Because what it's going to be is I'm going to have to be the filter for everything. I'm going to have to constantly go, well, that's not really getting us where we need to go. And they're like,
Where is that?
yeah,
Where is that, Kacy?
where are we going? Like you just said, do this thing. I did this thing. And now you're not happy with it because you didn't do it. And so that is another reason. Again, I'm like banging my head as and I just that's it. I'm throwing the how and the what at them, and I'm not taking the time to deliver them or even remind them of the why. To your point, Justin, got to keep saying it over and over and over again because I'm hearing it over and over again. Like I'm getting the benefit of sitting in those meetings. They're not. And that is a responsibility of us as leaders to communicate that and communicate it often.
If I could, I have like a little bit of a prescription there. I think that could be helpful. I think one way I know that I'm only communicating the what and the how and not the why is a gauge I have is how many questions does my team ask me about the how and the what. Now, what that means is they need to feel safe enough to ask the questions, right? And to push back on me and go, "Oh, hey, I can totally do that. What about this? What about this? What about this? Why this? Why that? Whatever." And so what I have found is the more questions they ask me, that is an immediate flag for me of, "Oh, they don't know why. I have not communicated the why because like I said, if I'd given them the why, then the what and the how, A, they would probably just figure it out. But B, it would make a whole lot more sense and they would know what filters need to be on that report or what deadline does that really need to be or whatever, right? Because I think something will take this long and they know it'll take this long. I'm sure, Justin, you understand that from your world, right? And so for me, a flag is how many questions do they ask back to me? And so that's what I would say is the prescription there is just, does your team feel safe enough to ask, right? And or are they going to take your orders and just go do it, right? Because that's what's helpful is that I think the team feels safe enough to ask. And so that stops me from tripping over my own feet, right? And I have one leader in particular right now. She's so good. Oh my gosh. I mean, top 5 probably best leaders I've ever worked with. She's so, so good. And recently she asked me like 7 questions about something. And I went, oh, hey, reminder, she does her job way better than you would ever do her job. She's capable. Give her the why and leave her alone. Right. And I realized because what I asked her to do, she's thinking, I don't think that's really going to get you what you're after because I had the what and the how wrong. But that was the trigger for me was her asking me so many questions made me go, that's it. I didn't give you the why because you wouldn't have had to ask any of these if you knew that. So that would be the prescription, if you will. It's a strong term, but if your team at least feels safe enough to ask questions, I think that has helped me for sure be a better leader.
Yeah, I think that's a entirely other layer of this too is learning how to get them comfortable to ask questions. How do you grow the trust? How do you make it to where there are no dumb questions. You can come to me. You can ask questions. I know that's an area where I've had to it's taken a lot to try to figure that out with people, especially within the tech roles, right? Is, hey, you could ask a question and it doesn't mean that you don't know what you're doing. We talk so much in our space on the technology side around imposter syndrome. And I think, Alicia, it's interesting hearing you talk about the questions because the struggle that I have sometimes is not that people have questions or that the evaluating the questions they're asking, but the struggle is internally for them going, I don't want to ask any question because if I ask a question, then they're just going to think I don't know the what or the how or the why. And it's really interesting because I think for me, it's how do I get them to that safe place of safety to where they actually can do it? And it's hard. I appreciate the prescription though, because I realize that's a really good calibration to understand, okay, how am I doing at this? Like how is this going? And granted, it might look different from my team than your team, but I think that's a really good reminder of ways that we can evaluate how that's going.
Yeah. That's probably another book. I'm sure there's a book out there,
I'm sure.
But I do think it's helped. That's just a trigger for me of have I communicated the why? I can usually tell based on how many questions they ask.
That's good.
So, yeah, we could talk about that for hours. One more sort of topic before we close, and it's a little bit different. We've been talking a lot about how communicating your why, how it'll have you approach your job, approach your team, how your team will experience that, what the effects of it on them will be. But I kind of want to talk about sort of long term. So in I think it's page 181, Sinek starts talking about success versus achievement. So both of you, I mean, all of us, like I said, sit on the C-suite. So we've done it. We did it, guys. We've reached the top of the mountain. We are on the pinnacle of success. And the one thing that I love that Sinek talks about is that there's a very big distinction between achievement and success, right? And people that are focused on the what, that lead out of the what, and that often attain the what, they say, I don't have enough, right? And so as you've gotten to your level of career, I would ask, do you feel successful? Right? And it was it everything that you thought once you got that amazing C in front of your name, the chief? Do you feel that difference between success and achievement?
Gosh, yes. And I'm just going to emphatically jump into it. I think, honestly, I would say that's probably one of the biggest traps that I fell into as a leader that wanted to achieve things, right? That I wanted to be driven. I wanted to go after things. I wanted to be seen as somebody that could get things done, that could lead a team, that could take us to the next level or do this. And I think that's a huge trap that I see a lot of people fall into, not just leaders, but people who want to achieve things. I see that where you have this thought that if I can just get to this, or if I can just do this next thing, or if I can just do this, or get this next title, or get this title, then man, I'm going to feel it. I'm going to feel it. I will have arrived and everything's just going to fall into place. And you all know this as well, probably. None of that magically happens because even when the titles show up, the reality is it doesn't magically solve anything. And I think for me, what I had to learn, I left the company that Kacy and I worked at together. I left there, I think it was January of 2021, and went out and started consulting on my own. And it was pretty shortly after that one of my clients was a small nonprofit organization, about 14 people, and said, "Hey, we want you to come on full time. We need you to take on this role. We have a founder, but we really need somebody that can lead all the operations. And we want you to come in as the COO, work with the board and some transition stuff." And I'm like, great, here we go. We can do this. And it kicked my butt day after day after day. Now, I had a title. I had a C-suite title of a small organization. I had a lot of people at an organization that were saying, "Hey, tell us the vision. Where are we going? What are we doing? What are we going to do when we get there?" And what I will say that I had to learn so quickly was once I got to that, it didn't change anything. Guess what? I had to work harder. I had to do more. I had to be more focused on strategy. I had to be more focused on vision. And what I found in myself, Kacy, was I had a season. It was probably one of my hardest lessons was, oh my gosh, I've done things. I have this and this and this and this. I've checked off these lists. And at the same time, I don't feel it. I don't feel it. And the reason was what I was chasing was the notoriety, the title, the success, what I perceived of that at the time. And I had kind of lost sight of what that underlying purpose was, what the why was for me, what the why was. I was great at trying to come up with the why for the organization, right? And trying to tell other people what that was. But for myself, it was spotty at best. And I think during that season, what I learned, at least for myself, was titles don't mean anything at all. It doesn't magically make anything happen. Being chief technology officer doesn't amount to a hill of beans. Guess what? I'm still going to get in write code. I'm still going to do day-to-day stuff. We're at an organization now where it's fantastic, our size, how we've had growth. But man, me, our CFO, our COO, we're still getting into the trenches and doing stuff from time to time because I think at least what I've learned is the title doesn't alleviate any of these other pains. All the title does is it straps some more responsibility on top of it. But if you don't have that underlying purpose really dialed in, and again, there's layers of that purpose, right? I truly believe there's different things that you have to focus on, different whys, like you said, Kacy. But what I had to get really good at was going, okay, what are those whys? What are those whys at work? What are those whys at home? What are those whys during different seasons in my role? And I think for me, I had to learn that. I had to overcome that and go, oh, it doesn't matter. Like doing the achievement, getting that title, that's not going to actually give me the purpose. That's not going to give me the why. I have to understand what that is for me to be able to actually still move forward and be successful at what I'm doing, because just achieving some things, I don't think it sits the same way.
Yeah, I think I had somewhat of a similar experience there. I think getting the title was an interesting experience for me. I actually didn't tell anybody in person. So if someone ever asked me like, "Hey, what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I work in operations for a software company." That was my go-to answer, cuz I felt this weird, probably a little bit of imposter syndrome if we're being real honest. Probably some of like a I don't to me, I knew how much I had to learn and how much I was the most keenly aware of the gap between where I wanted to be and where I was. And so it was almost like if I said my title out loud to other people, it was the imposter syndrome of like a fraud, but it's like, but like, I'm not a good COO yet. Like, yeah, I have the title, but like, if you saw my Google history of the things that I am Googling on how to do my job, you would question anyone who ever gave me that title, right? Like, I
It's
still
now my
Google
Claude
things.
history.
Right.
Yeah,
my
there you go.
Claude version of my
Correct.
Google history.
100%. Yes. At the time, it was Google.
How do you do marketing?
Man, like when I became COO, right? It was there was a lot of HR stuff that I had to learn. I didn't have a background in that, so I've got a quick, Google Claude MBA in HR, right? So it was a lot of things. So I think for me, there was never this like I have arrived, right? There was never that. It was holy crap, do I have to learn? Sorry, I'm say crap. Do I have to learn so much more? Of figuring out that was to me, the title was, okay, you got it, but it just between me and the mirror of like, but you need to like up level. You know what I mean? And whether that's true, not true, whatever, that was still the internal conversation with me of it wasn't like I have arrived, I can kick back and rest on my laurels. It was almost like, all right, sis, you need to earn it. Like you got it, show up, level up, all of those things, which is probably a therapy conversation, right? But that was what the experience was for me of just like, okay, now it's time to develop more. Like you keep, to me, Justin, when you said this earlier, I'm like, man, preach. I want to solve problems. So to me, the C-suite title to me meant I get to solve bigger problems that affect the whole organization. And that is my jam. Like that is what I actually love. I actually don't, any human to say a title is irrelevant would probably be a liar if we were to say it's 0% relevant. But I do think it matters. The percentage there matters differently for people. I think for me, I care more about what I get to do every day. And so what I loved about having that title was just that it meant I got to impact the whole org. Now, also, that's a lot of responsibility. And so like Justin, what you were saying to me, it was getting the title. I felt the weight, right? I felt the gravity. I felt the benefits decisions that I made for healthcare affected a lot of people's lives. And now all of a sudden that's my call. Right. And so like a lot of things like that, it was like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's for sure pros to it. Like I said, I love the problems I get to solve. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. Also, it's so hard. It's so hard to be able to make the right decision all the time that spans an entire org, right? Whether that be the whole marketing org or technology or ops or the company, whatever that is. The C-suite title is pretty, but it's one of those things like the house is really pretty, but if you open up all the closets, it's really messy, right? Because there's a lot here. There's a lot to do, but like the title makes it look nice. But when everybody leaves your party and the house looked really nice, that like you got to go clean the closet, right? And you got to organize it. And there's a lot of work to be done there. So that's been kind of my journey with it is, for me, it's what problems do I get to solve? And that's what fills my bucket.
And those problems, I like that analogy that you gave with the closet, because I think that's the hardest thing, Kacy, is people don't realize until they're into that, right? That the things that you're having to wrestle through and the conversations you're having to have are radically different than when you were an individual contributor, or even if you were a leader of a team. And so this idea that my purpose is rooted in my title, like, yeah, the title matters. I agree, Alicia, but it's the realization I think that hit for me was going, oh, it's just bigger problems now that we have to solve. Harder conversations that affect larger groups of people. But again, that means it's back on me to really hone in on what my purpose is. If I really want to be solving problems this way and do this, this, and this, that means I'm going to have to level it up. I'm going to have to do this in a way where it's okay to have a really hard conversation where it feels like this with other people. And yeah, you'll survive. You'll get through it. It's okay. But I love the analogy you gave, because I'm like, I think that's what it feels like sometimes is you open up and you go, cool, I got the C-suite and they're saying, cool, okay, everybody else left the party. You're going to stay and clean up stuff now. Like that's really what it was. And again, I love how you painted that picture though, Alicia, because it is like the first time that you start dealing with these things, you go, oh my gosh, it's not like I've arrived and I've learned. And if that's what you're rooting your purpose in, then you're going to have a really, really rough time. It's going to be really difficult because it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like you get over that big hill, and I feel like, at least for me, and I think this is how you described it, is you come over that hump. And I think on the Dunning-Kruger effect, they call it kind of the pit of despair. And you're sitting there going, my gosh, like I'm 44 years old and I think it's going to take me another 25 years to learn everything that all these other guys that are in their 50s and 60s have learned. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to ever get there. Like there is so much more to go after. But again, if your purpose is just rooted in the title, you're never going to chase it down. You're never going to be able to go after it.
Well, guys, this has been so much fun. There were so many things. And again, we pre-talked this, and there were things that came up on this call that I was not even expecting. And so thank you both, one, for reading the book, digging in with me. I think that there are so many good takeaways that people are going to have. And so I'll close this saying, like, this is the first book. Start With Why is the first book in a series of 12. And they're going to build on each other over these next 12 months. Each month, I'm going to take a new book, distill it down to a single principle, and make it actionable. And so I really feel like there's some serious things that people could do to really put this into action. So thank you both for joining me. I'm excited. Hopefully you'll join me on one of the next book studies, and we'll see you next time.